As I've gotten older, I've come to thought of myself more and more as a comedian. So I was thinking, I had a good one. There was that slaughter, the knife attacks. It must have been horrific, just beyond words. And I thought to ask what it was. This is a tough question to ask. Tough. A joke should have some depth and maybe even some anger, but should it be as rough as this? I don't know. Should. Okay, but we know the incident that I'm talking about, and what is it? I'm gonna guess the Gladue principle at work isn't that far off. I think between him and the other guy, I think that they had been charged or convicted of something like 300 things, probably. 300 is an exaggeration. I always exaggerate the first word out of my mouth. But if you looked it up, I bet you it's somewhere around 200. That's the things that they got caught for. They got caught for 200. They committed 1,000 each. Some really violent stuff. I mean, it should have been absolutely obvious. Well, obviously it was obviously obvious to obviously everyone, obviously. How could it not be? How could you get charged that many times and they don't know how to, they can't keep you in the clanker? And then people wind up dead like that? Just look into it. Was his leniency in some way the product of the Gladue principle or not? Was it brought up? Was it raised? The people who passed judgment, were they all well schooled in the Gladue principle? I'm sure they were. So, yeah, there you go. But there's another lighter thing. So I'm talking about the name changes to high schools and things like that. So I looked into them, studied the phonics. I wouldn't want to learn to speak them because there's too much kind of guttural kind of sounds. I find them quite difficult. I think I find that quite difficult. And they've written it in a script that nobody could read aloud if they hoped to, or if they heard it, they could never write it down. They could never take a dictation. They'll have trouble entering it into a computer. So it's just obviously just absolutely moronic, because they want place names in Canada to reflect Aboriginal culture. So there's the first two problems. It doesn't work as a language. Nobody's learning it as a language. I don't know what kind of headache they're going through, trying to do it on a regular typewriter. Maybe you can. Some of it looked pretty weird to me. Maybe you can, though. I don't know. But, you'd have to learn how to do it. You'd have to learn how to interpret the phonics. It's a phonics thing. So there it is written up there. How do you pronounce it is the challenge everybody's going to have to take on, and it's difficult. It's really difficult, in my opinion. But I think that if you had a good teacher, it'd be a lot easier. Okay, so then there's, the white tier contingent that, maybe it's been living with the name of a particular lake or place or building for, just a puny 150 years or so. Even I get sentimental. Like, this place, I've only lived here for 6 months. I'm sentimental about that. I'm the sentimental type. Like, that's one thing that people who want to go around tearing down, like they tore down, I think, Queen Elizabeth's statue, and her head was knocked off. And the cops stood around and watched that happen. There were more cops than there were protesters, and the cops stood there and watched them pull it down, and Queen Elizabeth's head came down. It's either her or Queen Regina. Yeah, absolutely berserk stuff. So they're coming in with these things, and they don't care, I guess. I've never heard anybody ever mention just the sentimental value that people could attach to places, like a school that you grew up at. One of them, the really old one is maintained the original name. The one that was put up in the 60s or so took that. But a lot of places you see this writing, so just ask yourself, look at it, can you read it aloud? If you can't, it's not a great phonetic system. And there's all the hassle for the post office and for people sending mail and, checks, or like who knows what sort of correspondence. Any correspondence with the school's name on it, you'd anticipate that there'd be quite a bit. They're going to have to go through this hassle of figuring out how to type this stuff down and to reference it in speech. It is so stupid. And to, multiply the stupidity by quite a bit, I would say, is the fact that I think it's like half of Canadian place names are of Aboriginal origin anyway. Aboriginal orange. That's a good. I like that Aboriginal orange. You saw that with the Every Child Matters Day thing that's today. I think people were well intentioned. The post office and everybody that has to type it in is going to have trouble. And I don't know what it's like when they try to reference to each other. They probably just call it by the old name. Why wouldn't they? That's what it's been called all along. Why suddenly you're going to come along and change it? I think that, for example, Canada, I believe, is a word of Aboriginal origin, as is probably Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Napanee, Ignace, the Skeena, Skookum. Can't actually say I'm really up on my Aboriginal anymore. I know that for a while I was trying to do it mixed in with more like a Texas drawl. Trying to fuse a Texas drawl in with a Texas drawl. More of a Texas drawl. That didn't sound at all like it. First you gotta get the Texas drawl. Texas drawl. It's hard to go from that accent to the other, I bet. I had it so they were fused. And it was really, honestly, it was sinister sounding. I had a really good down south United States, right? And mixed it with Aboriginal accent, from maybe the Nishka or something. And it was absolutely sinister, scary sounding stuff. And I was mad too. And I was talking about my opinion on the drug addiction problem here is, I do feel like, I don't know. It's just so ridiculous. They need mandatory treatment. We've had enough with the harm reduction model. Who was it that came up with that? Harm reduction. It's a euphemism for let's make it as easy to stay wired on junk here as possible, and we're going to bring in as much from fentanyl from China as they want to send. And we'll have junkies stealing your stuff to send money to China. How badly can you screw up? How ridiculous can it get? Mandatory treatment is the only thing. It's the only thing that will work now. And the thing is that the great humanitarians, with their harm reduction model and all that, held themselves up as the superior people and the ones with a soul and all that, compassion. Toxic compassion is the deadly, sickest thing, because they never stop. They think they're justified in what they're doing, I guess. But the thing is that you can see that the drug problem's only gotten worse. So they screwed up, didn't they? They screwed up, step aside, and let some reasonable people come in. People who will be compassionate and bring treatment to the people, all the thousands of people that need it. Yeah, it's a kind of a, I suppose you could say, authoritarian thing to do. Got to be careful of that, right? People from my end of the spectrum, you never know what kind of nastiness we really intend. The notion that liberals are just better people is so trash now. It's just beyond belief. Absolutely beyond belief. Biden and the people who produce military equipment in the United States, and the oil companies as well, I think, have a lot at stake in making sure that Russia isn't selling all the oil to Europe. They could have just done it voluntarily, and because they wanted a war. What kind of people wanted a war? And that's what they wanted. So they pushed NATO on Ukraine, and they got what everyone forever had always understood, that that's what would cause a war with Russia. That's Joe Biden saying. I saw it a while ago. I don't have it myself. Saying, if you want a war with Russia, push NATO on to Russia, and you'll have a war. He said that about 10 years ago. They wanted a war for some berserk reason. What in God's name? Because they've got a war now. There's the war, and you don't see either of the sides pushing for reconciliation of any sort. So we got, in Canada we got the reconciliation. Why aren't some of the people talking about reconciliation all the time? Just standing up and say, that's what we need to demand that our government do, is focus on the need for reconciliation. That's what I want Pierre Poilievre saying. If Pierre Poilievre, I guess, doesn't have the idea, I don't know. But I don't want him trumpeting the same old horse shit that you get from everybody else. Canada's disgusted with this, disgusted with that. Yada, yada. Doesn't have a clue. It was been obvious for a while that Russia and Europe can have this kind of struggle. And it's been often obvious for a while that Canada could have been the ones to replace the Russian oil. And we could have done it through negotiation. But we didn't produce the oil. We didn't build the gas pipelines. That right now would have been earning us tons of money. And would have been, and we would have been helping the Europeans. That's what happened. You could see a conflict between Russia and Ukraine brewing, and it could project from there that possibility. I don't know that I said it. There's people whose job it is to think things like that. There's people whose job it is to report that kind of thing on the newspaper, to talk about something serious. You can watch mainstream news and not hear a word of truth or sense in a day. Exaggerating, of course, but no, I mean, like that they're not covering the committee hearings into the Emergency Act. That is the most stunning piece of history that I've ever witnessed, just myself, because as it turns out, it didn't really have the scientific justification for the mandates in the first place. And when they called in the Emergencies Act, the truckers were already leaving, and they went to excessive measures, right? Freezing bank accounts. That's very serious. That's very serious when a government, like, it's funny, Christy Freeland is talking about, Canada's reputation because of the border closures, and you think that's as much of a blow to Canada's reputation as freezing bank accounts? Are you kidding me? Mousy little idiot. She's a mousy little idiot. I can't stand her. And the worst thing is that she used to be so fantastic. She used to be, I think, the best critic in the world of the World Economic Forum, because it promoted the wealth inequality. She was on that for a long time. Now she's on the payroll. She got a battalion. It's a Nazi. There's Nazi battalions, and she got one in a photograph with her. Nazis. She got one in the back of the photograph with her, and she said, "Oh no, it's just a story. It's Russian propaganda, lying about Nazis in her own poster." I'm serious, and I think that she posted it knowing that it was there. There's been Nazis in Ukraine since the Second World War. That's just a historical fact. Absolutely factual.